The trees in this forest are not wood. They're something else and they're waking up. Welcome to the Wilderness Protocol. The science of dendrochronology is built on a simple, beautiful truth, that trees are nature's scribes. Each ring in the trunk is a record, a story of a season of sun or drought, of fire or flood. We study them to understand the past, to chart the history of the world as written in wood. We believe we can read their stories. But there is no protocol for a forest whose stories are not written in a language we can comprehend. There is no procedure for a tree that is not a plant but a vessel. My name is Dr. Eris Thorne. I am Orwasa paleobotanist. I have dedicated my life to the study of ancient forests. But in the grove known by the locals as the Hushing Woods, I found a forest that was not old but timeless. A forest that was not growing but waiting. This is my field report. This is my testimony. The trees in that forest are not wood. They are something else. And they are waking up. The assignment was the culmination of my life's work. A research grant to study a newly discovered, isolated grove of what appeared to be an unclassified species of conifer, deep within the Tongass National Forest in Alaska. The grove was found by a satellite survey, a strange, perfectly circular patch of forest in a remote, inaccessible valley that didn't appear on any of the older maps. The initial aerial photography was baffling. The trees were massive, far larger than any known species in the region, and their growth pattern was unnaturally uniform. They called the valley the caldera, though there was no geological evidence of a volcano. I led a small specialized team. There was Dr. Lena Petrova, a brilliant and pragmatic geochemist. There was Ben Carter, a young, eager graduate student who was our climbing and rigging expert. And there was our guide, a local Tlingit man named Elias, a silent, watchful presence whose knowledge of the deep woods was profound. He was the only one who seemed hesitant about the expedition. There are stories about that place, he'd told us, his voice a low rumble, as we loaded our gear onto the float plane. The Hushing Woods. Our elders say it is a place that does not belong to the earth. A place where the trees do not sleep but dream. And you should not wake a dreaming forest. We, of course, dismissed it as fascinating but irrelevant folklore. We were scientists. We were there to measure, to sample, to understand. After a 2-day journey by plane, boat, and a final, grueling hike, we arrived at the edge of the grove. The sight was breathtaking. The trees were titans. They were not pines or firs. Their bark was a deep, iridescent, almost black material, smooth and cool to the touch, like polished obsidian. Their needles were a silvery gray, and they didn't rustle in the wind. They seemed to absorb the sound, creating a pocket of profound, unnatural silence around the grove. This, we assumed, was the reason for the name Hushing Woods. We established our base camp just outside the perimeter of the grove, a collection of high-tech tents and equipment that looked fragile and temporary against the backdrop of those ancient, silent giants. The anomalies began on the first day of sample collection. Ben, our rigging expert, was the first to notice. He was attempting to set up a line to ascend one of the smaller trees to collect canopy samples. He fired a compressed air line launcher at a thick, high branch. The grappling hook hit the branch with a dull thud. "That's weird," Ben said, frowning. He tugged on the line. "It's not setting. It's like the wood is too dense." He tried again, aiming for a different branch. The same result. The hooks would not bite. They would simply bounce off with a strange, non-resonant thump, as if hitting a material that was not wood, but something else entirely. Something that absorbed kinetic energy. "Let's try a core sample," I suggested, my scientific curiosity piqued. We brought out the hand-cranked increment borer, a tool designed to drill into the heart of a tree and extract a thin, pencil-like core sample. We used these cores to count the tree's rings to read its history. I placed the tip of the borer against the smooth, black bark of one of the trees and began to turn the handle. It didn't bite. I applied more pressure. The hardened steel tip of the borer, a tool I have used on the most ancient and petrified of woods, simply skated across the surface, unable to gain purchase. Lena came over, a look of disbelief on her face. Impossible, she muttered. She ran her hand over the bark. The surface is smooth, but it has the tensile strength of quartz. She pulled out a geological hardness pick and attempted to scratch the surface. The pick left no mark. We stood there in stunned silence. We were in a forest of trees that we could not climb and that we could not drill. We were botanists who were locked out of the very subject we had come to study. That evening, back at camp, Lena worked late, analyzing a small flake of the bark that had chipped off near the base of one of a tree. The results she got from her portable mass spectrometer made no sense. "Eris, come look at this," she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and utter confusion. "The cellular structure, it's not cellulose. It's not lignin. There's no carbon base in the way we understand it. It's a crystalline silicon-based structure. But it's arranged in a complex, repeating pattern that mimics the cellular matrix of a plant. And it's riddled with metallic trace elements I've never seen before. Iron, nickel, yes, but also iridium, osmium. These are meteoritic elements. They are not supposed to be in a biological system. A silicon-based life form?" I breathed, the idea so fantastic it felt like science fiction. "It's a tree made of rock and metal?" "Not exactly," she said, pointing to another screen. "Look at this. The sap I managed to extract from the flake, it's a conductive, gelatinous colloid. And it's generating a low-level, but constant, bioelectric field. This thing, it's not just a rock that looks like a tree. It's a massive, geological, bioelectric circuit." We were standing at the edge of a discovery that would rewrite biology, geology, everything we thought we knew. We were ecstatic. We were on the cusp of a Nobel Prize. We were so blinded by the brilliance of our discovery that we failed to see the warning signs. The first true warning came from Elias, our Tlingit guide. He had not entered the grove with us. He had remained at the edge, watchful and silent. That night he approached our campfire, his face grim. "You must stop," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You are being too loud." "Loud?" I asked. "We've barely spoken. This is the quietest place on earth." "Not your voices," he said, his dark eyes looking past us towards the silent, black trees. "Your machines. The borer. The spectrometer. The satellite uplink. They are loud. You are making a noise that this forest is not used to. You are waking it up." We tried to reassure him, to explain the importance of our work. He just shook his head. "You think you are studying the trees," he said, his voice full of a deep ancient sorrow. "You are not. You are standing in the middle of a sleeping giant's nervous system, and you are poking it with a stick." He retreated to his tent at the far edge of the camp and did not speak to us again that night. We, in our arrogance, dismissed his words as the poetry of a superstitious mind. The next day we brought out the heavy equipment. If we couldn't drill it, we would cut it. We had a small, portable, diamond-tipped chainsaw for collecting larger samples. Then pulled the starter cord. The saw roared to life, a violent, profane scream of internal combustion in the profound silence of the grove. The moment the saw started, the whispering began. It was the same sound I'd read about in other reports from the Wilderness Protocol. The sound of the hushing woods. A high, thin, sibilant noise that seemed to come from the silvery gray needles of the trees. But it wasn't a passive sound anymore. It was focused. Angry. Ben, wearing his protective gear, placed the roaring saw against the trunk of one of the trees. The diamond-tipped chain sparked as it made contact with the black bark. It screeched, it whined, but it began slowly, agonizingly to cut. A thin black, dust-like powder, not sawdust, began to spray from the cut. He had cut maybe an inch deep when it happened. The tree he was cutting, and every other tree in the grove, all at the same instant, did something impossible. They moved. It was not a sway. It was not a bend. It was a contraction. A shudder. The entire grove of colossal silent titans seemed to clench, like a massive muscle. A low, deep, resonant thrum vibrated through the ground, through the soles of our boots, into our very skeletons. Ben screamed and dropped the saw. The engine died. And in the sudden, ringing silence that followed, a new sound was heard. It was a dripping sound. I looked at the cut Ben had made in the tree. From the thin black gash, a thick, dark, viscous liquid was oozing. It was the color of crude oil, but it shimmered with a faint, internal bioluminescent light. It was the tree's blood. Its conductive, gelatinous alien blood. We stood there frozen in a tableau of pure, scientific horror. We had done it. We had woken the dreaming forest. We had poked the giant with a stick. And now it was looking at us. The low, resonant thrumming from the grove continued, a constant, deep vibration that was more a feeling than a sound. It was the sound of a vast subterranean machine powering on. The air grew cold, and the silvery gray needles of the trees seemed to brighten, glowing with a faint, sickly light of their own. "We need to leave," Lena said, her voice a tight, strained whisper. "Now! Pack the essential samples only. We leave now." No one argued. The hubris of our scientific curiosity had been replaced by a primal, instinctual fear. We scrambled back to our camp, our movements frantic and clumsy. We began to tear down the tents to stuff our gear into our packs. It was Elias who stopped us. He was standing at the edge of our camp, his face a mask of grim resignation. "It's too late," he said, his voice soft but carrying an awful finality. "You have woken it. And now it knows you are here. You cannot leave until it is done with you." "Done with us?" Then asked, his voice cracking. "What does that mean?" "It is a hungry place," Elias said, his gaze fixed on the glowing, humming trees. "But it does not feed on flesh. It feeds on possibility, on what you are and what you could have been." Before we could ask him to explain his cryptic warning, the ground at his feet began to move. The soft carpet of pine needles and earth erupted upwards, and a single black root-like tendril, thick as a man's arm and glistening with the same dark, oily sap, shot out. It moved with incredible speed and precision. It did not strike him. It wrapped itself around his ankle. Elias did not scream. He just let out a soft sigh, a sound of weary acceptance. He looked at us, his eyes full of a deep, profound sorrow. "Do not let it copy you," he whispered. And then the tendril tightened, and he was pulled from his feet and dragged, silently and impossibly fast, into the darkness of the grove. He did not make a sound. He just vanished. We stood frozen for a heartbeat, our minds unable to process the quiet, efficient horror of what we had just witnessed. Then Lena screamed, a raw, piercing sound that shattered the unnatural quiet. That was a mistake. The sound of her fear seemed to act as a beacon. The thrumming from the grove intensified, and the ground around our camp began to bulge and shift. More of those black, root-like tendrils erupted from the earth, snaking through the air, their tips quivering as if tasting the air, searching for us. We ran. We abandoned our camp, our research, our multi-million-dollar grant. We ran for our lives, plunging into the non-anomalous forest that bordered the grove, the normal, familiar woods that now felt like a distant, foreign country. The tendrils did not follow us far. It was as if they were tethered to the grove. After 100 yards, we stopped, gasping for breath, and looked back. The hushing woods stood there, silent and menacing, its silvery needles glowing with a cold, predatory light. We had escaped its physical reach, but I knew with a chilling certainty that we had not escaped its influence. We had no map, no compass, and only a small emergency pack that I had had the presence of mind to grab. We were lost, but we were alive. We decided to head south, trying to backtrack the way we had come, hoping to find the river that would eventually lead to our extraction point. We walked for hours in a state of shock, not speaking, just putting one foot in front of the other. Night fell, and with it came a new, more insidious form of terror. We made a cold camp, too afraid to light a fire. We huddled together for warmth and a fragile sense of security. It was around midnight when I heard it. A soft voice calling my name from the darkness. Eris. It was my voice. A perfect, calm, and reasonable imitation of my own voice. I sat bolt upright, my heart seizing. Lena and Ben were awake too, their eyes wide with fear. Eris, my own voice said again, from just beyond the bushes. I have been thinking. Logically, the entity is geographically confined. If we circle west, we can bypass its zone of influence. I have analyzed the topography. It is the most rational path. It was using my own personality, my own logic against me. It was offering me a sensible scientific solution. Don't listen, Lena whispered, her voice trembling. It's a trick. Then another voice joined the first. This time it was Lena's voice, a perfect copy of her crisp, pragmatic tone. He's right, you know. The data suggests this is the optimal route. Arguing is an inefficient use of our remaining energy reserves. And then Ben's voice, full of its usual youthful confidence. Yeah, guys, come on. Let's just do what he says. We can't just sit here. We have to do something. It had them all. It had our voices, our personalities, our patterns of speech. It was puppeteering the memory of our team from the darkness. It was presenting us with a perfect, logical, and unified argument, using the voices of my own friends. They're not real, I said, my voice shaking as much to convince myself as them. They are echoes. They are what Elias warned us about. We stayed huddled together, ignoring the calls, ignoring the flawless logic of our own phantom voices as they debated the best course of action just out of sight. It was a psychological siege. It was trying to break our trust in each other and in ourselves. After an hour, the voices stopped. We were left in a silence that was thick with the new, terrifying knowledge. The creature from the grove hadn't just been a physical threat. It was a psychic one. It had touched our minds. It had taken samples. And now it knew how to replicate us. The next day, our journey became a nightmare of paranoia. Every shadow seemed to hold a familiar shape. A distant rock formation would look, for a moment, exactly like Ben's slumped form. A patch of lichen on a tree would resemble Lena's profile. The forest was no longer a neutral landscape. It was a canvas upon which the entity could paint our deepest fears. We were arguing, our nerves frayed, about which path to take, when we saw him. It was Elias, our guide. He was standing on the trail ahead of us, leaning on a walking stick. He looked calm, solid, real. Elias! Ben cried out, a wave of relief in his voice. You're okay. How did you get away? Elias smiled, a gentle, sad smile. There is no away, he said, his voice a perfect imitation. There is only the grove. It is much larger than you think. It does not have boundaries you can measure. What are you? Lena asked, her voice a low, hostile whisper. I am a memory, the echo of Elias said. A story the forest tells itself. I am the story of the man who understood, and who accepted. And I am here to offer you the same choice. It raised a hand, and in its palm were 3 small, beautifully carved objects. One was a perfect, miniature wooden canoe. Another was a tiny, intricate snowflake, carved from what looked like bone. The third was a feather, etched from a piece of smooth, black stone. It offers a gift, the echo of Elias explained. A new form. A new story. A quiet, permanent existence. You could be the silent water of the canoe. You could be the perfect, frozen symmetry of the snowflake. You could be the weightless flight of the feather. A story without pain. A story without fear. A story without end. All you must do is choose. All you must do is accept the gift. It was a temptation. An escape. An offer of peace in the face of unbearable terror. Ben, young and terrified, took a step forward, his eyes fixed on the tiny canoe. No more running, he whispered. No more running, the echo of Elias confirmed, its voice a gentle, soothing lullaby. Ben, no. I yelled, but it was too late. He had already made his choice. He reached out and took the small canoe from the echo's palm. The moment his fingers touched it, his body went rigid. His eyes went wide, and then they went vacant. A soft, gray light seemed to be drawn out of his mouth, a wisp of smoke that was absorbed into the ground. He stood there for a moment, a perfect, empty shell. Then he turned, and with the stiff, unnatural movements of a puppet, he began to walk back in the direction of the grove. He did not look back. Lena screamed and ran, crashing into the woods. I stood frozen, watching the empty vessel that had been my student walk away. The echo of Elias now turned its sad, knowing eyes on me. It held out its hand again. The snowflake and the feather remained. "What is your story, Dr. Thorne?" it asked. "The cold, perfect logic of the crystal? Or the free, silent flight of the feather? Choose. Be still. Be at peace." The choice it offered was the siren's song. To simply stop. To trade the chaotic, painful, and terrifying story of my life for a new one. A simple, elegant, and eternal narrative. The snowflake or the feather. The logbook I would later find back in the ruins of my camp had an entry from a lost botanist in the 1950s who described the same choice. She had chosen the feather. Her last entry read, "I am so tired of being rooted to the ground. I choose to fly." They found her journal. They never found her. I looked at the echo of Elias, at the profound, compassionate sadness in its eyes. And then I looked at the two gifts in its hand. I thought of my life's work. The study of ancient things. Of stories written in rings and fossils. My story wasn't simple or perfect. It was complex, messy, full of questions and revisions. It was a living, breathing thing. And I was not ready for it to become a fossil. "My story is not over," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "And I am not accepting any gifts." The echo of Elias did not get angry. It just looked at me with that immense, ancient sadness. The sadness of a collector who has found a rare specimen that refuses to be collected. "Very well," it said softly. "The crooked path is yours to walk. But all paths in the end lead back to the grove." And then it, and the gifts in its hand, dissolved into a cloud of shimmering, silvery gray needles that were caught by a wind that wasn't there, and vanished. I was alone again. Ben was gone. Lena was gone. I was the last one left. I don't know how I found my way out of that forest. I think in the end it let me go. I think having failed to copy me, having failed to tempt me, it simply lost interest. I was a failed experiment. A data point it couldn't classify. My noise was too persistent. I stumbled out onto a logging road 3 days later, half dead from exhaustion and dehydration. The official report, the one that sits in a log file at the USGS, tells a very simple story. It says our guide Elias died in a tragic fall. It says our student, Ben Carter, and my colleague, Dr. Lena Petrova, wandered off from camp in a state of disorientation and were never found, presumed victims of the harsh Alaskan wilderness. It says I, the sole survivor, was suffering from severe psychological trauma, and my account of events was, therefore, unreliable. It is a neat, tidy, and logical lie. I no longer study paleobotany. I can't. I cannot look at a tree without seeing a vessel. I cannot touch a piece of wood without wondering what story it dreams of. My life's work has become a source of profound existential terror. I now work in a different field. I work here with the people who collect these reports, the people who maintain the wilderness protocol. Because I am not the only one. There are other groves, other hushing woods all over the world. There are other ancient, dreaming, and hungry intelligences. And there are other protocols. But I know the truth of the grove in the Tongass. It is a biological, geological, and psychic anomaly. It is a life form that does not fit into any of our neat little boxes. Is it alien? Is it terrestrial? I do not know. My hypothesis, the one I keep to myself, is that it is something far stranger. I believe it is a living fossil, not of a plant, but of a different kind of life altogether. A life that existed before our carbon-based world. A life of silicon and electricity and pure consciousness. A life that does not die but only dreams. And when we intrude, when our loud biological processes disturb its slumber, it wakes. And it is curious. And it collects. I am left with the final chilling thought. The entity did not just take Elias and Ben and Lena. Took their voices. Took their personalities. It took their memories. It now has a collection of new stories to tell, new masks to wear. It is still there, waiting, and it is learning. The next time someone stumbles into the hushing woods, the echo that greets them might not be a sad Tlingit guide. It might be a pragmatic geochemist. It might be a confident young man. Or it might be a paleobotanist who can talk to you, with perfect, scientific authority about the stories that trees tell. And it will offer you a gift. And it will promise you an eternity of peace. And it will be a perfect, beautiful, and utterly convincing lie. Thank you for the completion of this field report from the Wilderness Protocol. The world is older than we are, and the rules of life are not always written in a language we can understand. Some trees are not just wood. They are libraries. And their collections are permanent. If this testimony has served as a necessary protocol, please consider liking this video and subscribing for further records. Be wary of the silent places. And be wary of the things that dream there. You may not like the story they have chosen for you,